How's it going, everyone? It's Sam. Last time I posted a video like this, it literally got taken down from the internet, and I'm doing something a little bit risky because I think this is something that you should be paying attention to. I think you should be seeing this. We're going to be watching a couple clips from Whitney Webb's recent interview with Natalie Burnell on her YouTube channel, where Whitney Webb, who's a deep state conspiracy theorist slash someone that digs into politics and what's happening behind the scenes with major financial institutions, she digs into what the institutions are doing right now with Bitcoin, why they might be on Bitcoin's side, why we still need to be vigilant, and why, just because BlackRock is buying Bitcoin, just because they're pushing Bitcoin, it doesn't mean that everything is on the up and up. We have to be vigilant. We have to remember that they might be dollarizing Bitcoin. So we're going to dig into that. If you don't mind, hit subscribe, turn on the bell notification underneath the video so you can see future videos just like this. There's also a link underneath the video to Margex where you can start trading cryptocurrency using leverage. You can get this set up in just a few seconds. You don't need a VPN. You don't need a KYC. And this is one way that you can try to, get outsized returns this bull market. I've seen a lot of people that have signed up for this and have really liked it so far. Of course, always do your own due diligence. Make sure that you read the terms and conditions as well. So today we're watching this clip, or these clips from Natalie Burnell. She just posted this yesterday. And like I said, I actually got my video taken down. I got a warning from YouTube because I've been through that video 10 times trying to figure out what exactly was going on there. I even appealed it, and they continue to take it down. And honestly, this might actually get my page stricken, or it might give me a strike, which would cause me not to be able to post videos for a little while. So if that happens, I'm going to be posting this over on X too. I did this on my last video if it gets taken down, but the original video is not taken down, so I should not be taken down in my opinion. But let's play what Whitney Webb is seeing right now in the market and what she's seeing with politics coming up, also with what BlackRock is doing, what certain institutions are doing, and what the government is doing, trying to get access to Bitcoin, and watch your every move. Let's play the clip.
As far as this particular election goes, things are going to get crazier as we get closer to November. And, I think that's sort of by design to sort of try and get people, Americans, really engaged with electoral politics again, because I think most people have been really burnt out and really disillusioned with both parties. And I think you're going to continue to see both parties attempt to energize their bases by very perhaps unconventional means, or, doing stuff that maybe they haven't done before. But, either way, I think, regardless of who wins, ultimately a lot of the same people are going to get what they want, because at the end of the day, so much of the stuff that the American people are tired of are really bipartisan agendas, right? And, regardless of who's in office, when there's a crisis, the same people tend to be called upon to solve the crisis. So, a good example of that would be the 2008 economic crisis. BlackRock was basically sent in to help handle the banker bailouts. And then during COVID, when Trump was in office, BlackRock was brought in to essentially design the COVID fiscal policy, which the ramifications of which we're still dealing with. That's just one example, but, there's so much, whether it's funding wars or funding, the state of Israel, for example, with billions of U.S. tax dollars and things like that. There tends to be bipartisan consensus about a lot of things. But I think, there's an effort to sort of frame this as an election that's not that. And, each group in their particular, partisan silos, think their candidate is going to be the answer and magically reverse all of this stuff. But unfortunately, both are essentially, bankrolled by, major forces in Silicon Valley specifically. And a lot of those Silicon Valley oligarchs tend to double as contractors to both the military and also intelligence communities. And so, maybe you'll have sort of the PayPal mafia crowd behind Trump this time, maybe because of JD Vance, but he's got, David Sachs and Elon Musk and people like that in his corner. And even though Peter Thiel's being quite quiet, there seems to be some overlap there as well, which we can get into later. And then, of course, on the Kamala side, you have people like Reid Hoffman and Eric Schmidt, who are also share a lot of overlap with the oligarchs on the other side, like Eric Schmidt and Peter Thiel sit on the steering committee of the Bilderberg Conference, which is kind of notorious for being a closed door meeting of prominent, globalists in the corporate world and in the public sector, and Reid Hoffman and David Sachs and Elon Musk are all part of the so-called PayPal mafia. They just happen to fund different parties, and all of these oligarchs at the end of the day, do they frame the reasoning for why they want these policies differently? They agree about more biometric surveillance, they agree about digital ID, and they ultimately agree about programmable surveillable currency, whether it's a CBDC or a private bank digital currency that's also surveillable and programmable. So, if you're against those things as policies, it's important to pay attention to the policies and not so much the campaign rhetoric, because people tend to forget, during a campaign season, that campaigns are essentially sales pitches, and very few people, when they campaign, actually keep their campaign promises once in office. And one example would be, Trump back in 2016 and 2015, campaigning that he was going to reinstate Glass-Steagall. And then when he was actually in office, allowed banks to be deregulated even further. And of course, there's plenty of examples for that for the Democrats as well. Obama being, a really glaring one with, being against the big banks during the 2008 economic crisis, and then having his entire cabinet essentially being chosen by Citigroup, right? Which arguably caused the crisis and had Glass-Steagall repealed to facilitate its merger in the late 90s. So, this is kind of stuff that, people forget, and it kind of makes me unpopular for bringing it up. Some people don't like to hear this stuff during election season because people get really emotionally invested in particular candidates. But getting emotionally invested in candidates is not my job. My job is to remind people of the policy records of the candidates that are running and the ramifications of the policies that they're suggesting on the campaign trail. And so in the case of both Trump and I guess Kamala, who's going to just be an extension of the Biden administration, these people have been in office before, and we can compare what they said on the campaign trail to what they actually did before. And I think it's important to do that so people don't get burned this time, at least not as badly, assuming that, things are going to be different this time and getting really emotionally invested in that outcome and then have that not be the outcome. I think generally when politicians do not keep their campaign promises, and, we should pay attention to what they did when they were in office more than what they've said in the past on the campaign trail at the end of the day. So, maybe that doesn't make me popular in some circles, but I do tend to dunk on both parties. But, invariably what happens in election season is if you dunk on one candidate, they'll just assume you support the other. So I have people thinking, I support both Trump and Kamala when I don't support either at all. And my position for a long time has been that both parties have been essentially run by, organized crime for decades, probably close to 100 years in the case of the Democrats. So, I'm not really interested in playing those games, but, a lot of people have difficulty breaking from, those cultural structures really that, people have been so used to going through every 4 years, pretty much, their entire lives.
Because a lot of people want to vote orange. They really just want to pick the candidate that is going to be most friendly to Bitcoin. And I know you've done a lot of research and work in this area because when we went to the Bitcoin conference, we did see a lot of conservative figures. Trump came out and said he's going to be for Bitcoin and embrace it. We had RFK Jr. since last year saying he has policies that are going to be pro-Bitcoin. And then the Biden and Kamala administration, they've been the most hostile. I think some people are trying to open up communication lines, but they haven't been going that well. Can you offer your take on specifically related to Bitcoin, the people that are passionate about financial freedom and the candidates that we have to select from?
Yeah, well, I think it's pretty obvious that it's the conservative camp really only, aside from, RFK being an independent, that are interested in really appealing to the Bitcoin base at all as it relates to electoral politics. And they've done so very successfully. But I think, again, what you're seeing here is sort of what we saw over the course of the past year was sort of Wall Street warming up to Bitcoin. And what we're seeing, it's just another extension of the establishment cozying up to Bitcoin, I guess. So I guess you could frame Larry Fink's about face and all of that as sort of the private sector establishment turnaround, and this is sort of the public sector establishment turnaround. But as far as it relates to financial freedom, I don't think the policies expressed by Trump, or at least what Trump expressed or hinted at in his speech, because he didn't, as far as RFKs went, he was more deliberate about what his policies specific, and Trump was a little more vague. But based on what Trump said, talking about sort of yoking Bitcoin and the dollar together and using that to expand the dollar's power and hegemony globally, and then also bringing in stable coins, which of course would be in this case dollar denominated stable coins into the play. We have to consider what that means if the reason we're voting for it is to ensure that Bitcoin will be used to propagate financial freedom globally. So, if you're of the opinion that you want Bitcoin to be, hyper Bitcoinization to come at all costs, even if that means it not being a tool for financial freedom anymore, or it being used by intelligence agencies to surveil people, or by Wall Street to, do their thing, then maybe it's fine. But if you're of the idea that, I want Bitcoin to be empowered to end irresponsible fiscal policy at the national level, and want it to ensure financial freedom for everybody, then I don't think Trump's policies necessarily spell that out, unfortunately. And part of that has to do with the whole stablecoin play. So Trump has been very openly against central bank digital currencies, but the problem with stablecoins, particularly the big ones, is that they're just as programmable and surveillable as CBDCs could be. So most people are against CBDCs because of the programmability aspect and the surveillability aspect, being able to trace and surveil every dollar you spend. And stable coins can offer that as well, because most of them are built, they're like ERC20 tokens right at the end of the day, and have that programmability functionality. And some stablecoin issuers that are prominent, like Circle, openly talk about the programmability aspects of their stablecoin. And they're in a very deep alliance with BlackRock, Circle particularly, and Tether itself has made an alliance with the FBI and the Secret Service, and other aspects of the U.S. government to freeze wallets at the behest of the U.S. government, thereby making Tether sort of a soft extension of U.S. foreign and fiscal policy abroad as it relates to sanctions and other things. Some of which the U.S., of course, in the past has used to facilitate regime change operations and other things, not necessarily stop terrorism, as they are inclined to say. So it's important to keep that in mind. And, if you're allowing intelligence agencies, what the FBI technically is, to be onboarded onto your stablecoin, it's really not a private sector thing. It's a public-private partnership. And public-private partnership is the model that the U.S. and really most of the world essentially favors. And so, I think these stable coins offer that same kind of threat to financial freedom, or, easily could, were things to develop that way. And so, if programmability and surveillability is the threat to financial freedom, then we should not support that, right? And instead look for ways to build robust privacy tools on the base layer of Bitcoin, maybe, and try and make it something that's transactable, as opposed to this idea of having it be a storage or a technology for asset storage, as Larry Fink says, and something no one spends and people just hold, which is, what Larry Fink wants, and also, the way Bitcoin would be utilized in the framework that was laid out in the Trump speech at the conference. I want
to dig into stablecoins and dollar hegemony a little bit more, because I heard you and Mark Goodwin, your co-author of one of the investigations on the What Bitcoin Did podcast, and I'm not sure if it was you or Mark, but talking about the idea of the dollar hyperinflating into Bitcoin almost. And I was wondering if you could kind of break down the mechanics, because I know a lot of my viewers or listeners will be familiar with the fact that the dollar is in trouble, maybe not in the near term, because these things take a while to play out, but countries are de-dollarizing. There is less of an incentive to hold U.S. treasuries because we just keep printing. Now stable coins are providing new demand for these treasuries, which would potentially extend
record demand, really.
Yeah, which could extend dollar dominance. But what is this plan that you sort of see in place, this strategy, so that the dollar remains the global reserve currency, but there is that Bitcoin component to it?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you consider what the fiscal policy has been with respect to the dollar, since the creation of the Federal Reserve, the purchasing power of the dollar has just, been demolished over the course of the past 100+ years. So in order to sort of get away from that, viewing Bitcoin as really the only means of digital credit, if you're going to make, digital dollars, if you're able to yoke digital dollars to that and use it as a sink for hyperinflation, that seems to be sort of the idea here. And obviously, the person that can speak best to this is Mark, who wrote the book on the Bitcoin dollar, as he calls it. And I would really recommend anyone more interested in that to either look up his interviews or read his book, because he's obviously a lot more qualified to talk about that than I am. But I think ultimately, at the end of the day, if that system is to come to fruition, it has major implications for why a lot of people got into Bitcoin in the first place, which is to stop irresponsible central bank policy and irresponsible U.S. government fiscal policy and, the debt burden and all of that, because it doesn't provide any incentive for them to stop hyperinflating, essentially, or printing debt, creating more debt and all of that. They just view, the view seems to be that they could just use it as a sink for the debt. So, I don't necessarily think that's the big win that maybe some people are framing it as. And I also don't see, necessarily perpetuating the hegemony of the dollar or fiat in general as necessarily a good thing, because, it's just sort of a symptom of the debt-based monetary policy that the world has had for a few hundred years now. And obviously, there have been a lot of problems that have come with that. And I think, as people in the Bitcoin space have pointed out for a long time, that really can't continue. And so do we really want to use Bitcoin to perpetuate that? I think that's an important question to ask. And I mean, obviously something has to be done about the U.S. national debt, but, is this really the best way to do it? And I don't know. I personally think that some of the people responsible for all of the debt in government, Congress, who are, most of those people are multimillionaires working on behalf of multi-billionaires. Maybe they should be held accountable for some of the national debt stuff and not just be like, oh, we can use Bitcoin as our plaything to sort of get out of all the irresponsible decisions we've made for the past, 100 years plus.
But I know that you do see potential for Bitcoin, and it is an opportunity if we go in the right direction, right? If individuals take it seriously to self-custody and all of that. So how do you see, maybe in a positive way, Bitcoin holding the government more accountable or helping us move to a standard that is a little bit more fair and based on something that no one can manipulate or control? Or do you really worry that, the forces in power are going to make it such that privacy is pretty much impossible and everyone needs to custody with these centralized custodians so that they can kind of surveil and track your Bitcoin? Like, do you think that these forces are just going to clash and one's more powerful than other? Because we have the numbers, right? We're the people, but
Yeah, well, I think the system they're setting up, the goal is to have the US dollar, Bitcoin, and stable coins all be part of the same ecosystem. And you see, prominent Bitcoin banks, as it were, like Zappo, marketing that they're the bridge between those three things, because the goal is to have those three things, all be part of the same system, as it was essentially outlined by Trump's speech. As it relates to Bitcoin, I think that is not the answer. I think, if Bitcoin is the sound money, it should be what is transactable between people, and that robust privacy tools need to be built upon it. Because if the issue is surveillability, I think that needs to be tackled there. And I think, based on how this whole system's been described, the retail facing part of it would be the stable coins, and that people would just be holding but never transacting with their Bitcoin. But, there has to be consensus for that. And it seems like the establishment consensus, and there's a lot of people, in the Bitcoin space that are just, very caught up in the electoral politics and the emotions of it, and feeling validated for what, the industry they've been in for several years. That's obviously sort of not been favored by the establishment. Some people are maybe thinking, since the establishment is favoring this, let's cheer it on. But is it really the best system for everybody? And is it the best for financial freedom and all of that? So, I would urge people to consider, what is it that you want Bitcoin to be used for? Not just, well, again, there's some people that are hyper Bitcoinization at all costs. Doesn't matter if we totally abandon the original ethos behind Bitcoin and getting there. And I think there definitely are a significant amount of those people, but I don't agree with that. I think the ethos is very important. I think Bitcoin is unique, and it's really the only opportunity like this we're likely to have, at least in this important window of time. And, people need to decide if they're going to use it to fight for those things, or if they're going to acquiesce to the system that's being set up and is going to be pushed on people, most likely through regulation and executive orders. And it's very likely that in the next 2 years, whoever wins in November is going to be president during an unprecedented US government debt crisis. And this is, if you already see it in Trump's policy, if he's in office, this is the system he's going to propose as the solution. And when there is a crisis and the solution is proposed, a lot of people, because it's a crisis and are demanding a rapid resolution to that crisis, they don't think about what's best in the long term necessarily. They're just looking for something to solve the immediate crisis. And so I think this is sort of hinting at what we're going to see. But again, I would urge people to go back to what Trump did when he was in office during the COVID crisis and the fiscal policy that his Treasury Department presided over, which was very bad and very criminal. And for people that aren't familiar, I would encourage them to look up the work of John Titus about the going direct reset, where essentially before there was a financial crisis related to COVID in late 2019, BlackRock created this plan that pitched to the central bankers at the Jackson Hole meeting in 2019 about going direct. And basically the idea was, during the next crisis, let's QE again, but instead of giving the QE money to public entities, let's give it straight to the private banks. And that's essentially what happened. And one of the people that received those funds, those emergency funds that were meant for Main Street, was BlackRock. And they used it to buy shares in their own ETFs instead of bailing out the people whose businesses were forced to close as part of government policy. And so really, this is one of the key reasons why you saw an unprecedented wealth transfer happen during COVID. And this plan wasn't implemented as soon as COVID started. They actually started when the repo market started to go haywire at the end of 2019 and used COVID as the excuse to ramp it up. So, Larry Fink's involvement in that, and also his involvement in the 2008 financial crisis, for example, these same people at Wall Street, when there's a crisis, affect these massive wealth transfers that take, money from regular Americans to the very top, who are now richer than ever, especially after COVID. And, regardless of who wins in November, when this debt crisis comes home to roost, that's what's going to happen. And I think they're going to use that as well to saddle the American people with surveillable, programmable money. Maybe it's more likely if Kamala gets in, it'll be a CBDC. But it seems quite clear that if Trump gets in, it will be a private bank digital currency, or some of these private bank issued stable coins or tokenized deposits and things like that, which again are just as surveillable and programmable as stable coins. And maybe it will be framed as a win, but a win for what, really? Again, I'm not super optimistic about that. But again, my view is that the government is essentially run by, organized crime and intelligence agencies that have fused what they do, and it's been very profitable for them. And they're going to continue to do that and pull the strings of both parties. And when there's a crisis, this is invariably what happens. And there's plenty of historical precedents to look at as far as, the economics of it are concerned.
Yeah, well, the wealth concentration you highlighted, I feel like that's one of the things that ultimately, thankfully, led me to Bitcoin, because I was getting so frustrated and disillusioned, and I didn't know who to blame. And it was when I started to peer into how the financial system actually worked that I was like, oh, this is the root problem. It's politics and the polarization are all symptoms that are coming from it, but at the root of it, really just manipulated money, broken incentives, and corruption at the core. So I felt a lot of hope in Bitcoin, and I want to tug on something that you said, because one thing that I'm trying to do actually as well, and I see some of the other public figures in Bitcoin doing this, is when you go full force combating, maybe the people in power or powerful corporations, you don't you don't get very far, right? And so I think of a quote from the 80s, Frederick Hayek, the economist who didn't, Bitcoin wasn't around, but he said something about like, the only way that we're going to fix the problem of government and money is if we introduce something in a sly and roundabout way that they pretty much cannot stop. And I think a lot of people have hope that that is what Bitcoin is, that it's a Trojan horse, that as long as the more that we almost present it in a way that's very friendly and it can assimilate perfectly into the financial system, don't worry about it. Yes, oh yes, the dollar will remain global reserve currency, but ultimately, because of its decentralization and global adoption, it will sort of take over and be this neutral, not only reserve asset and all that, but currency that we can exchange value. Why do we need 160 currencies? Do you see that as being possible at all? That like it could Trojan horse in the solution so that we don't have to deal with all this. I mean, there will always be corruption, but that it won't be so easy, because when you can manipulate the money, it makes it a lot easier and more lucrative to do the horrible things that we see people doing.
Well, I think it depends on what happens with regulation and moving forward ultimately. I think it's been made very clear by the people that like it and the traditional financial system now, that they only like it if it's used as digital gold and not as something transactable. They don't want to transact with it. They want it to be something that's held and again is for asset storage, really. And that it's a digital asset, that it's never a digital currency. And I think we would be naive to underestimate them. Maybe they're acting like they're on the team of regular Bitcoiners right now, but I definitely don't think that's true. I think there's going to be a lot of efforts to centralize it as much as it can be, and control the on and off ramps as much as possible, and potentially make efforts to criminalize efforts to put privacy on Bitcoin. And I don't know. I mean, it honestly depends with a lot of the decisions that are made going forward. But I would definitely want people to be more vigilant, as opposed to being like, oh, as long as these people like Bitcoin, we have won and Bitcoin will fix this and we can sit back and relax and just wait for things to happen.
Right.
I think that's kind of QAnon-esque, and I don't think that's I think that's exactly what people like Larry Fink would like us to do, ultimately. And so if you want it to be those things and want it to be a currency and be transactable, and be able to challenge some of these efforts to centralize it and surveil it, then efforts need to be, you need to be very proactive about making that a reality.
No, that's
and pushing back against it. And I think an important time to do that is now, before there are regulations, before the system is in place, the system that the establishment would like to put in place, and the place it wants Bitcoin to hold, in their system. Obviously, that's going to be a system that benefits them a lot more than it benefits the rest of us. It's important to keep in mind that people like Larry Fink have very overtly said that markets don't like democracies. They like totalitarian governments. So this is a guy that is not about promoting your financial freedom or anyone's financial freedom. This is someone that likes top-down, centralized control to reduce risk in markets in which he trades and is active, so he can, make more profit for his shareholders, which are, multi-billionaires and other people like that. So, and of course, Fink's in that category as well. So, to trust these people, I think would be very naive. And I think, maybe there is hope of some sort of Trojan horse functionality there at some point later on, but not if people aren't thinking about that the whole time and thinking about how they'll affect those changes later on. And again, I think it would be very naive to think that regulation or the FBI or any of these other agencies aren't going to be very intense when it comes to how people are using Bitcoin, and if they're using it the wrong way. You have a lot of these establishment actors partnering up with groups like Chain Analysis, which I believe was funded by NQTEL, the CIA. They have a very vested interest in that. And then you have former CIA directors like Mitchell Morrill, who now works for Beacon Global Strategies, putting out pieces on Bitcoin and things like that, saying that, it would be preferable if criminals used Bitcoin instead of $100 cash bills and stuff. So, they definitely think they're going to be successfully able to surveil people. And again, they will be if regular Bitcoiners or developers do nothing to prevent that. And I think there's an effort sort of to make people think, oh, look, here we are, we've arrived, we've won, and sort
Yeah.
of get people to sit back and relax and do nothing, which again, I think was a lot of the strategy behind the whole like QAnon trust the plan thing, while Trump didn't keep his campaign promises. Oh, he's not keeping it because there's 5D chess happening, and just sit back in your chair and don't be active and don't hold him to account and don't demand that he keep the campaign promises that matter to you and things like that. And again, I would urge people to be vigilant and
Yeah.
proactive, I guess.